Good.
All right, I'm going to knock this. Hi, I'm Dave Moss, and I'm going to call to order this Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Information Technology Ad Hoc Committee. It is right about 4 o'clock p.m., and I guess we need to call the roll.
Yes, this is the meeting of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force of Information Technology Ad Hoc Committee meeting for April 25th, 2017. Time is 4 p.m. This clock hasn't been changed. On the call of roll, Member Josh Wolf. Wolf present. Member Bruce Wolf.
Present.
Wolf present. Chair Moss.
Present.
Moss present. We have a quorum. There are no agenda changes that I know of at this time.
Does anybody have any further agenda changes? Good to move along. Then I think that we are on to public comment.
Yes, item number 2, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda.
Okay. Happened on this meeting. I'm supposed to be here at 5. I have this running issue with the Arts Commission and slander. So Kay Patterson is the Public Information Officer for the Arts Commission, and she's been slandering and personally attacking me at Sunshine meetings for over 5 years. She makes false claims as to why she refuses to turn over responsive documents, even in their redacted form. Her claims have included, I spent time in prison, I have false names, I stalk and harass people I don't know, and I've been arrested for selling bottle caps. I've done none of these. I don't know where she gets this information from. It's not true. There has never been a San Francisco Police Department police report on me. Therefore, there cannot be any ongoing police investigations without a police report. And the city attorney's office is not a police investigating body. So Kay Patterson sent me an unsolicited email on April 10th of this year, and in it she makes claims that if she perceives harassment via email, she's not going to respond to Sunshine requests. I don't get that. I'm not the only person who doesn't understand what she was saying, but I will continue to file document requests until her slander stops. I don't even know her. I don't know why this is going on. This is my written public comment.
I already have it. Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing no further public comment, we can move on to agenda item number 3, which is go ahead.
Next on the agenda, item number 3, file number 17022, hearing. Creation of a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force database of orders of determination, case law library, and precedents.
All right. You don't happen to have the discussion where we talked about this before from the full task force?
Sorry, I do not.
It's okay. Bruce, did you have any thoughts to kick us off?
Yeah, so I think, can we suspend Robert's rules?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and suspend Robert's Rules of Order so we can just discuss this more fluidly.
Okay, so my thought on this has been for some time that it would help task force different iterations of the task force as they get reappointed from year to year, every other year, to have a body of information that it can itself and or the public can access much in the same way that the Board of Supervisors uses Legistar, the way the Rent Board has its own database for researching complaints and cases that come before them. But I think in the spirit of not reinventing the wheel and staying consistent with past rulings or determinations, that something like this would be helpful. A searchable database in a way that it could be searched by topic, it could be searched by name, it could be searched by file number, or some sort of regular expression, kind of open search in some kind of way, and developing some sort of taxonomy for it. So it could be cross-referenced by creating maybe some tagging for categories, or it could be done by year, that kind of thing. And just to finish it off, the city is, because of its commitment to open data, has a regular kind of crew of like technologists in residence that we could possibly draw from on whatever, maybe to piggyback on existing projects of other data, because most of the work they're doing is around database systems anyway.
What format are the existing records we have now?
The end product is usually PDF. I guess they get created in Microsoft Word, right? Initially, before you save them to PDF.
I can only speak to the board, to the clerk's office, and we usually do create in PDF and convert to PDFs.
You create in Microsoft Word.
Yes.
And convert it.
Documents submitted to us are only scanned into PDF, and the majority of our documents are submitted from other departments.
And so, any given case, how is that organized internally right now? Like, all of the documents that are attached to it, is there just a file?
Yes, there's just one file per complaint, and all documents related to that are placed into that file.
And what is the file system that is used?
How do you make it electronic?
What do you mean there's a literal file?
There's a literal file, and then any documents sent to me electronically, I just keep it in a separate folder by year, by file number and by year.
And that's just on the server, or
Yes.
how far do you think that goes back, at least the ones that you've organized?
My personal one is probably back to 2010.
Is there a longer archive? Older archive?
Everything is, we do have a paper copy that may go back further,
Okay,
because I wasn't part of that construction.
right, of course.
But we do have all documents from inception on paper, and it's probably in storage with Iron Mountain. Or actually, I think that's GRM now.
Mm-hmm.
So do you foresee us having a system that has the entire file, or just the sort of orders of determination?
No, I think it should have the entire file.
Okay.
I mean, it's somewhat treat it like a court system.
Well, I mean, I think that
Turn his microphone on.
It must be. Yeah.
Test. There we go. I think that, well, first off, designing the database structure and what fields we want, and then actually building some sort of database to be able to search them is probably going to be the easy part. The populating the data moving forward itself may present somewhat of a challenge, and then going backwards, I think, is going to be the biggest hurdle. But given that, currently each meeting is as I understand it, a single audio file, we should not only include the documents, but each audio file related to the case. We should identify all of the different sections of the Sunshine Act that we're citing in the orders of determination. Like, I think we can go through and fairly easily build as robust an RFP as possible with all of the, possible features that make sense, and we can always cut things as necessary. But unless we have at least figured out a means to continue populating it moving forward that isn't taxing on the task force members themselves, which even if someone on the current task force agrees to do, we can't rely on that institutionally moving forward. So unless we can find the means to integrate that into the workflow to ensure that it happens past our tenure, I'm a little hesitant in the viability of the project in and of itself.
I don't think that we're asking task force members to do any work in building it or populating it. I think this ultimately will be somewhat of a continuation of what the administrator would be doing. So as currently, if you're saving things into an electronic folder, it could be just as simple as that everything gets uploaded into some sort of container that the database would then populate accordingly.
Right. I mean, I think it may add an insignificant amount of time to the existing workflow. I just think we need to sort of be mindful of ensuring that doesn't hit its own brick road, whether it's realistic or, the clerk doesn't sign off it type issue, whatever is necessary to ensure that we can, build for success.
Okay. So I guess that's more of an administrative discussion. So I would say one of the reasons why I want to have this meeting before I submitted the annual report was to make that part of the annual report, that it would make for having better consistency on orders of determination by task force members that don't have any institutional history, so they have a easy and fast way to search for things. It helps the legal counsel in creating advice because it'd be pulling from the same database, the same information, and then just ask them for funding to be able to do it, and that this task force, make it. We create some sort of internal sort of policy or guidelines, or amend the bylaws to include something like that. So it becomes the idea is to make it memorialize it in some way, so it becomes institutionalized.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that all sounds great. I guess I'm just saying that if we build things that are going to require funding to make happen, we should be. This sort of came out of the EOTC meeting, where it suddenly was presented that EOTC should develop a training module, and the three task force members looked at each other and were like, well, I can't commit to authoring a training module right now, and no one else could, and there really was no resources readily apparent to move forward on that. And so I just see shades of similarity and want to ensure that we have a path forward.
Okay. All right. Well, that's disappointing to hear from those members, but okay, fair enough. I think for this particular kind of project, because it would be more or less managed by a staffer to the task force, that I don't think there'd be any changes moving forward in the future, since task force is required to have one.
Right. I mean, the biggest hurdle is the resources involved in going backwards and putting that old data into the database. Okay. And that's going to require some sort of funding mechanism, it seems.
And that's what I would be asking for.
Right.
And what I'll do is I will probably engage Jay Nath, who's the Mayor's Office of Innovation, because he kind of heads up the open data project, to find out what's available and what are people currently working on. From time to time, they have a kind of a meet and greet with all the developers and vendors, so they can kind of do a showcase of what they're working on. So, because I know, like right now, the next system to go up online is the assessor's office, and they got a big overhaul that's much needed. But what's funny is I think they were the first ones to have the GIS map in the city of all the plots. I used to get it on Adobe Illustrator. Mm-hmm. So
it seems like going backwards, we're actually looking at probably two stages of going backwards as well. There's the back to 2010 that exists digitally on Victor's server, and then there's 2010 back to however long there are crates full of records sitting somewhere. And dealing with the digital records versus dealing with paper records is that's a huge jump in effort as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think that was going to be my next suggestion, was to make this kind of a multi-phase kind of thing. And just, I think one of the things that we should decide is how far back is back enough to provide a good body of evidence so that we can draw upon it. Because what you may find is that in certain years, this particular task force, iteration of the task force, ruled differently than a couple of years, maybe the next iteration or the next iteration of the
I mean,
task
I
force.
think that's going to be a lot harder to parse out from this data because, you'd have to actually look at case by case to understand how it was
That's
a
what I
difference
mean.
of the
Yeah.
task force. But in terms of the types of violations that are occurring, which types of city departments, although, the city government, the elected officials shifts every 2 to 4 years, there is this ongoing governance that goes back. I don't know what the average tenure of a city employee is, but it's certainly longer than an elected official. And so there is certainly a lesson. The value becomes less as we move further back, and just looking at all of the digital records might be a good place to sort of move for the one. Once we move to paper, we need to really assess what the actual cost is going to be and figure out how to do it. But I think that once we start digitizing paper records, we're never going to go further back. So whatever we set is that point. I do see some validity in trying to capture all the data, but without a price point or a budget, none of this is.
Well, I would say at this point, let's not worry about what the money part is, because we've got to ask for it and create a proposal. So, and then that, then the horse trading happens, or the negotiation happens.
Right. Yeah, I'm saying, but it might just make sense to just, in this initial point, look at the digital records, because they'll be.
So, but how far back do you think we should go? I mean, what's feasible as far as a body of information that we work on? How far back? I mean, this law has not changed much in 20 years. Mm-hmm. So, most of the issues and the determinations should be fairly consistent with the existing law. So we're not going to have much of that issue to be dealing with. The only issues, as you're saying, you have to read it and actually see the context, is looking at similar cases that have had come out with different determinations and why that is. But I think that it's having the task force members having that, it can then maybe crystallize an appropriate, what the appropriate determination is, and you're either going to dismiss one and affirm the other, or some combination of that, and create something. Maybe there needs to be a new based upon certain circumstances. I just think it helps people get a better understanding than them having to kind of ruminate on the law, and I think for some people it can be difficult. Some areas of this particular law.
I think it'll be a struggle to be able to get that level of data to see how things came differently with similar circumstances, because the data that we're starting from, unless we're really taking apart the case files themselves, is just the order of determination, really.
Right.
So we don't have an easy way to sort same facts, different order of determination.
No, but that would be up to the person reading it to compare. They'll be pulling. So if they did a search for, let's say, violation of let's say it was a 67.21 violation, and it was, let's say it was a 6726 IDR, and so there was a similar situation. Somebody asked for information, it didn't come in within 24 hours, and it was and the response, it did come in within 24 hours. Let me rephrase that. They had an IDR, response came within 24 hours, but was told that there was no documents that were responsive. And then that respondent was found in violation. But then 2 years later, there was the same exact thing, but that respondent was not found in violation.
Right, but my point is that the second one is not really going to show up in our database.
Why not?
Because there was no
Order of determination.
Yes, there was. It's a separate case.
But in order for it to be recorded somewhere that it fell into this section, there would need to be a vote on that section.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was, let's say in 2010, there was an order of termination. In 2012, there was seems like the same set of circumstances, but it came out to be found in no violation.
Right, that's what I'm saying, though. If there wasn't found a violation, it didn't create an order of determination, which doesn't end up easily searchable within the database that we're describing building.
Actually, it should have come up as a order of determination. The order of determination is to find no violation.
Yeah, but it's not going to say no violation of section. It's not going to be that specific. It's just going to say no violation.
But the complaint would have stated what it was being violated.
Sometimes, right?
But
Sometimes.
No, all complaints state what. Pretty much all complaints have to apply to some section of the law.
But in order to make the database have that level of smartness, we have to add another layer of sophistication, because we can't just be dealing with the orders of determination. We have to be doing with the section of the code that's cited in the complaint, cross-referenced against orders of determination.
Right. So that was my point about using either a tagging or some sort of taxonomy system, so that when it gets entered, that it gets entered with which section of the Sunshine Ordinance is being cited as being the central focus of the complaint.
Right, and building the field to do that is the easy part. It's the how are we going to be going through the old paperwork to properly be tagging it in the first.
Because the paperwork is the same format as what's been used today. The format has not changed.
For the orders of termination.
For orders to almost everything.
Well, are you talking about the orders of determination or the complaint forms?
Both.
Okay.
Well, pretty much nothing has changed since I've been on the task force since 2005. Pretty much everything. Some of the verbiage and instructions have changed, but the way the format of things have been set up pretty much the same. Same thing with the legal counsel's advice is more or less the same exact format. So just the information that needs to be entered, I mean, if it's just a checkbox or a drop-down menu of every single section of the Sunshine Ordinance, if you look at a complaint, so I have for the next meeting, I have a complaint. Where is it? Here. So here's one is, it just says in the description, complaint filed by the complainant against the respondent for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721.
Right.
So all Victor would have to do is enter in 6721.
So
You
do
mean
all
these-
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So, I mean, I think the city attorney memo is actually probably the most useful as far as figuring out ways to tag things, because our city attorney is very good about having an applicable statutory section here, and we can actually just grab that from the beginning and use that as the marker for what section a complaint is allegedly addressing, and then you compare that with what the actual votes were in the end.
But conceptually, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. I just conceptually, I'm trying to understand whether you think this is feasible or not.
I mean, conceptually, anything's feasible, and I think it makes sense. I'm still. This may seem like the weeds, but from where I'm at in terms of how one would actually go forward and build the project, are you seeing our administrator going through to read these? Are we trying to identify the prompted text and then search for that and auto-populate in order to build the database? Like,
Well, I think to me, I like to start with the sky's the limit, and then let the developer say, this is all the money you have allocated to do things, so this is what we can do, or this is not feasible, or we can do the whole kitchen sink, or we can make it scalable, and we could provide, a way for the administrator to easily customize it as new fields need to be created or what have you. So, I mean, with all the pretty cool technology languages out there to build stuff, it can be pretty much point and click in a lot of ways. So I'm not too concerned about design as I am about just what do we want to have what do we want that database to do, and how much of it do we want us to do? I mean, so it's kind of like I think for anybody in the position that Victor's in, they're going to have an intimate knowledge of every single case that comes through because they're managing it from soup to nuts. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to the administrator applies the file number. The actual description on the agenda, they have to discern what that is based upon what the complaint, and many complaints are not well written at all. So it's the work of the administrator will already pretty much know what to flag or what to tag different parts should be. Like the actual meat of the complaint, like the actual kind of like discussion parts. That's why I said if you use a general regular expression search, then a person can look for like a word, like, building inspection. They can search for that word using a regular search function. But as far as getting to the actual case, getting to at least get a representative list of cases that pertain to an item that you're going to be working on, helps really narrow things down, and it gets it all in one place. So, I mean, it could be something as simple as just a listing of the entire file per year and just have the file numbers just listed, and you just click on the link and it opens it up to just all links of all the information of the entire case file, including the any audio files that are with it. It can be something as simple as that, okay? Or it can build from that. It can build on from that, or have a different starting point. So I'm just saying, clean, unused canvas. What would you like to see? And I think we should, start from there. And I mean, if we need to have a whiteboard pulled in so we can kind of map it out on a whiteboard and figure out what the taxonomy should be. I mean, maybe it not start with the file number, or maybe that could be a choice of where you can start.
I feel like at the very least it would be useful. I mean, even if we have very little budget or very little resources whatsoever, having a library of every case with the cases we see in the task force plus the order of determination would actually be very useful, instead of having to just go search backwards through minutes, which is kind of what I do sometimes already, is I just try to remember what hearing we held it at. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that would be like bottom level, like easy, and then anything above that is just figuring out tagging, whether things can be scraped from the records to populate that kind of tagging. But I think that,
yeah, I guess the thing is just, the way I think about these things is like, okay, so in my regular job, I have to create a proposal. Okay, so if I've got to create something like this, then I'm going to say, well, what is it that I want? I want the kitchen sink. So I'm going to get my penultimate concept of what I want. And then I'll go talk to a number of vendors and figure out what they have. Do they have something off the shelf that'll work for me, that provides me a certain amount of customization, so I've got to figure in now more labor time on my end? Or is it something I need custom built that will provide me, I'll have to pay for more labor to build it, but it's less labor for me to use it. And I'll weigh those things out. But I don't worry about the price too much, because what I'll get is I'll get a few different ideas of what it is. And even though this is on the public record, I'll just say it, when dealing with a government agency, you just really want to go for as much as you can get as your only proposal, and then let them chew you down. So, but I think what we're asking for here, in all the years that the task force has been in business, to ask for something like this that would benefit the public, I think a one-time investment on something like this, especially when the city is making, tens of millions of dollars in investment in many other agencies, that I don't think this is a heavy lift at all.
Well, and it's probably something that could be implemented by other commissions as well and whatnot. I do think that segmenting the audio and attaching it per cases and then linking it is really big and important and is not practical now. So, like, if you want to hear a piece of audio, you're like having to scratch around and find things, and then if you need to tie that audio to something else, like, you literally have to load it into QuickTime and cut and paste and move it around, and it's not workable as a resource method. But because we don't have video, and because the notes are really about action notes and not exactly what happened, attaching the file with the audio clip and the documents really does create a meaningful tool. I think the sort of creating any sort of search functionality within there that also allows you to both search within summaries and ancillary documents, so that you can isolate what you're searching to be essentially within the right kingdom. And, like, if you're only looking for this word inside of complaints, you don't end up with all these emails that are actual public records dirtying up the search results. Mm-hmm. But I do think that, like, potentially, the responding department is a crucial thing that we are able to build an analysis of, like, which departments are responding to these sunshine complaints, and then being able to filter which ones were borne out and which ones were not successful. Mm-hmm.
So with and without violations.
Right. And then with and without violation should basically be a filter that can be done on any level of the search. Mm-hmm. And then being able to search for all of the different codes that we've cited for potential orders of determination, and being able to analyze them. And because sometimes orders of determination cite multiple codes, we need to build the tool to address that and make the histograms make sense appropriately, which I haven't wrapped my head around yet.
So I could see having some sort of like a checkbox system, where you can say, I want to see all violations that had, these three or these multiple, whatever number it is. I want to see all cases regarding these three, and you could either then set it with a, what's the word for that? The Boolean term, either an and or an or. Mm-hmm. So you can create, a real search query. So I want it to be 6721 and this other one, so that way you get to see only those records that have both those sections that apply to the case, versus I want to see any I want to see any of them for 6721A and D. You know, it could be or. I want to see everything for
And then
A or D.
beyond all of the sort of conditional searches that we're describing,
Right.
realistically speaking, however the data is being stored should be a standard open data format data set, so that, like, if what's really important is being able to, like, whatever we're not going to think of right now, someone can just download the data set and write the script to identify whatever it is that we're not thinking
That's what
of
the
right
Open
now.
Data Project is all about, is standardizing how data is stored. That's actually been set by the Sunlight Foundation, where they actually go from government to government and try to help normalize data schemas, so that way kind of standardized APIs can be used across all databases.
Right, but in terms of the RFP, I mean, maybe this
Oh, I
just
see.
goes without saying,
Yes.
but I'm saying that
Got
it's
it.
important that we
Yeah,
explicitly say that this data should be built in a easily
yeah,
transportable data
Yeah.
format
Yep.
standard.
yeah. Yeah, portability is definitely important.
Right, and if that's already part of, like, the San Francisco, way everything works in the city,
Yeah.
it's not going to hurt to put it down anyhow, and I
Yeah.
think it shows where we're coming from.
Yeah, I think it has to be part of the RFP anyway. I agree with you. Okay. Victor, what would you, if you had a tool like this, what do you think you'd like to
Well,
see in it?
there needs to be more than just a file number or a code section reference, because a lot of the subject matters we get into are of particular interest. So, like HIPAA issues, police issues, and that type of subject
So
matter.
non-jurisdictional stuff, or do you,
It's not directly related to. They're all 67.21 or 25s,
Right.
but they're more in depth, where we're making decisions that are not
got it?
common.
Got
Those
it.
are the ones that are very interesting will be very interesting to the task
Okay.
force.
So, just as an example, I can recall a case where a person was requesting his own medical records from the Department of Health, and claimed that that because it's the Department of Health that it's public record. And then the public health said we can't do it because of HIPAA. But so then we had to review what HIPAA said. And HIPAA said that if the actual patient was requesting their own records, they cannot be withheld for any reason. And it was only applicable for additional conditions if it was a third party or power of attorney, actually, even. Power of attorney would have to show proof. But an actual patient trying to retrieve their own records only has to show their own identification, and that's it. So once we figured that out, then we can apply Sunshine. And I think that's what an example.
Well, and I mean, that's an interesting example because a very similar case came after you left, before you returned, while I was on the Sunshine Task Force. And I believe we concluded we didn't have jurisdiction because when he was requesting his own record, it ceased to be a public record and ceased to be inside of the scope of the Sunshine Ordinance itself. So these are the same facts and two different outcomes.
That's right. That's right.
So a perfect example of how this
That's right.
resource could have been useful.
And it got somewhat complex. If somebody didn't think about, okay, let's see what HIPAA has to say about this. We also had a case, I think it was the first case that I came back to here, was the guy who was asking for the radio frequency channels.
Remember that guy?
And, that actually applies to police code. And, I mean, there's a whole lot of codes regarding all that stuff. And then the question is, our only question is it public information or not? And are there any restrictions to releasing information? where are those, and then you have, the treasure hunt is to find out what section of the code. But actually, it shouldn't be our treasure hunt. That really should be the respondent's treasure hunt, to say, under this code, it, doesn't, I'm not required to release it. Our only further investigation on it is to refute that. And I think that actually needs to come from our legal counsel, or unless somebody who takes it upon themselves to research it themselves. But at least at least some question should be brought up by our legal counsel to have researched that a little deeper enough. But, I think there are a number of cases that do come to us in that way. I remember one other case where a guy had something in his backyard, and it was behind some bushes, and when they did some yard work, they found this big concrete thing with a manhole cover on it. And he didn't know what it was or why it was sitting on his property. So he went and he tried to find out, and he was able to find out that it was under the jurisdiction of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And they claimed Homeland Security not releasing the information about what it was about. And after a while, we kept hammering them on it, and they said, well, the most that we can tell you is that it has to do with the water system. And so they're not required to do that. Another case is the fiber network in the city. The city will say, Homeland Security, we don't have to reveal that. But if you go to City College, they'll just hand it to you because they're the ones that built the system. But that's a state agency. It's not a city agency. So the city has a different set of standards than the state agency. So, it's all different ways to look at this. But I think his point is a good one. The question is then how do you then create like a drop-down menu of every single code?
It would be
state?
hard to track because there's so many special situations that are of interest.
Right. But you see, I think that's where just what we call a regular expression search, where you could just put any word that you want in there. So you could just put HIPAA in there and it'll pop up.
But I think that architecturally the best approach, while including the expression search in there makes sense and will alleviate a good chunk of this, establishing a set of dynamic tagging that's on top of these other existing predefined fields, so that
be a little more descriptive about dynamic tagging.
I was.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
And I guess in 2017 I should just call them hashtags, even though they don't need to have hashtags. But basically, there's all these parts that you go through and you select which of these apply and check them, and there's a limited universe. So there's, let's say, 20 sections of the Sunshine Ordinance broken down piece by piece. That's probably not the right number, but that's the total universe of those. So you just check all of those that apply. But then the hashtag / tagging, dynamic tagging, whatever we want to call this, is like you type in HIPAA, and then Victor can add another one that's like medical, and it's up to him to sort of add whatever ones of those are in there. It's not a clean and discrete system because Victor's replacement may not use medical and may just use HIPAA, but it does give you this additional layer that is a shortcut and is probably a benefit on top of the expression-based search.
So I think with regards to whoever's administrating or entering in the data, which I don't anticipate being it more than the actual administrator, that there's a discipline for that tagging.
But but that's the whole point of it, is that it can never be truly. We build the discipline inside everything else, and then the tagging becomes
a little more fuzzy.
It has to be fuzzy by definition. Now, Victor would probably always use HIPAA, and maybe Victor could document. Well, he wouldn't need to document because it would show all the existing things.
We can just say medical records or something like that.
It doesn't.
It
doesn't matter.
You could do both.
Well, yes, all of these are possible, and we could try to write up an order on how to do that, but we're not going to be conclusive because then this new thing comes up that should have a tag. So basically, like, creating the feature and then allowing the administrator to use it as best they see fit is probably the smartest way than to dictate how to add the supplemental tags.
So probably for the purposes of legacy, probably best to set up like a set of best practices. Like, this is the way, like for Victor being the initiator, the first one to be working on this system, he could develop like this. These are my best practices, and then hand that document over to the next administrator that comes in, who may say, okay, I can work with that, and then optimize it, and then they may want to optimize it.
Right. Well, they would literally be handed the tags themselves from however many years Victor goes backwards and forwards, and presumably the system would prioritize the most common tags and the most recent tags. So it's already going to kind of do that work on its own if the system is built correctly. Like, there's the database itself side, which might be SQL or something, and then there's the tool that we're interacting with it, and they should be compatible, but they need to be compatible. But unless we're building it, we have to look at what off the shelf exists to surf that database.
Yeah, when you say that, I'm thinking of Stack Exchange. So there's this platform called Stack Exchange, which is used for mostly for open source development, and they have a tagging system where for every tag that you start typing in, it will like autocomplete or give you a list of the tags that might be what it thinks you're trying to choose, and then it tells you how many times that tag has been used, and that is a signal to the person that's providing this new entry that if you want yours to be, your entry to be, to show up in somebody else's search, you're more likely to want to tag it to something that's popular. And so it shows you kind of how many times or some popularity rating or something like that. And that might be a way to automatically to get some intuition involved.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the same approach on a number of different platforms, and it seems to become, if not a standard, at least a common technology tool.
It also have a what do they call that? A tag cloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure that those exist anymore.
I know. They're pretty fun. All right.
So what do you need from us what point do you need us to get to today?
So I think today, I mean, we don't have much time left, but I think one of the things we should provide, I think, at least as much, I think our next meeting should be, we should drag a whiteboard in and try to develop as much of a conceptual visual idea of what we would like the not necessarily, I guess we can do both. We could do both a schema, figure out which fields we're interested in having, and then deciding what filters we want from that, how we want the filtering to work. I mean, just kind of get a conceptual idea that a developer would say, okay, I know what you're looking to do.
So we're sort of talking about, the consumer side of the back end and the front end is two separate things to look at.
Right. And I would, because if we want to try to get this done fairly quickly, at least we can create a proposal that speaks enough to it that because the Board of Supervisors doesn't really need too much detail, or else it doesn't, the whole discussion doesn't go well. So you really want to be a little more superficial than than detailed in the initial proposal, because then what they say is, okay, if they approve it, then the real work comes with developing an RFP and the actual design.
Wait, but when the Board of Supervisors approves it, is there a dollar attached to it at that point?
Dollar attached.
So don't we need to figure out how much it's going to cost to figure out what we actually want to ask for?
We will, right. So what we will do is we will collect something as conceptually as possible to present to a developer or developers, get some quotes through like a request for information or, that kind of thing, just so we can get an idea of what's out there and what the costs are.
Is the Ethics Commission using anything to track their
I don't
decisions?
know.
Because
It's a good
that might be worth checking.
Yeah, if they're
Right.
using something, it'd probably be similar to what we would want anyway. Or
We should probably,
it's a good.
as our research side, also, the ethics is a great one, but the Police Commission and the Office of Citizen
Oversight.
Office of Citizen Oversight. All three of those entities have a greater need for this sort of library resource than a lot of the other commissions. And then simultaneously, what is the technology that the Board of Supervisors is using, and can we reverse engineer it to meet our needs?
Are they using some sort of version of Granicus or something?
Well, Granicus is what they use for video streaming.
But I mean, the video, though,
I believe
is tagged
Granicus
to audio.
purchased Legistar. Legistar was an independent company for many, many years. Granicus, about 2 or 3 years ago, purchased Legistar.
Actually, if you want to look at Legistar, it's really set up more for, I don't know, it probably could be redesigned for our purposes. The fields are, it may work. It's close. It's very close. Let me ask you, Victor, what does the Board of Appeals, do they use a system?
I'm
that
not
we're
familiar
discussing?
with
Okay.
theirs.
Because I know because they, mostly come under, Board of Appeals is under the Board of Supervisors, right?
No.
Oh, it's still planning?
I believe they're an independent city agency.
The Board of Appeals?
Yes. 3-person department.
Permit appeal? Oh, really? I didn't realize. Oh, okay. I thought they were an adjunct. Okay. Never mind. But they may be another one also, Board of Permit Appeals. And then also check with the rent board too, because the rent board manages arbitration. So I would think any kind of quasi-judicial type of.
So does anyone know how our license with Legistar works? Can we just add the Sunshine Task Force to the account, or
It would all be negotiated.
it's not like the Netflix Unlimited account?
Right. Yeah.
We would need to get a separate license and so forth. And I'm just guessing at that. That's just from overhearing certain conversations, but we would need to license any additions or changes.
I think that would be prudent because if sometime in the future the task force becomes its own independent body, it should have its own license. Not necessarily its own license, but its own account.
Yeah, well, I'm still trying to get any sort of sense of pricing on Legistar, but
Okay. So, yeah, that could be easily. I'm sure if you do a search on Legistar for the cost of Legistar, I'm sure the Board of Supervisors had to prove it in the budget somewhere. Okay, so is there anything else on this part? So we've talked about taxonomy in some ways. We've talked about, making, what should be contained in a file.
Search
Search functions.
I mean, one thing that we can do, like, starting off that won't incur any cost or anything else is just start thinking about how we can tag documents moving forward or what kind of fields we want to start pulling from things.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we should make decisions about that right now, but maybe the next time we meet, we can actually bring the orders of determination from the most recent full task force hearing and just sort of use that as our example to go off of. So we have we're not just pulling this from memory, but we actually have concrete examples that we can look for and say, oh, well, this one would make sense if we pulled this out, or we'd highlight these.
Let's say, how about just from the beginning of January? Because we only do maybe 2 or 3 or 4 per meeting.
Sure. I mean,
So if we get it a dozen, it'll give us a good variety of things.
yeah, I guess I was thinking only those, because when we actually start looking these, we're going to find way more things to tag than maybe is actually necessary in the end. Because I'm in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, we could have all these 50 fields, but then is somebody actually pulling those manually? Is Victor going to have to, for each one of these, fill in 50 fields on a form every time he does this?
Well, if we go with a Legistar type system, that would be done beforehand and not afterwards.
Okay, so you actually don't have control over what searchable fields or
Well,
filters?
with the current Legistar for the Board of Supervisors, upon creation of file, we're inserting all the fields.
Oh,
so
okay.
we're not doing it after the fact; we're doing it beforehand. So if
Okay.
it's resolution or
No, that's correct. I mean, the thing is in the future, I guess my question is more on flexibility, it's more in the future,
Legistar
it becomes
is not very Legistar is not very flexible.
not
at
very
all.
flexible.
And Legistar does not at all meet the data portability line item that I tried to put on there earlier.
I mean, are we conceptualizing this basing everything off of the are we basing it the unit is the file or the unit is the order of determination? Where you have the order of determination and we're classifying basing that and that is attached to the full file, or are we going to be tagging the entire file?
The unit needs to be the file, because if we make the units the order of determination, then
There may not be one. I'm sure plenty of times the task force has not taken any action. So there was actually no formal order of determination per se. I think it may be, since Victor's been here, he's kind of notated it as, there was no vote, but essentially the order of determination was not found in violation.
and the file number already serves as a solid unique ID number.
Right.
That's true. But I mean,
Just one note on that. I was sort of the person who implemented the file numbers prior to me coming on board, or a few administrators. They didn't use file numbers at all.
What did they use?
I think there weren't enough complaints to worry about it. I do notice that in the past. There were
What
no
number
file
did you
numbers
start with?
I'll have to look in my records. I have my emails going all the way back to
Yes.
20.
But Victor, what was the first case? Was that file 0001 or?
There was no number assigned at all. It was just
No, the first one you gave a number. Did you start with 1, or can we go backwards and create numbers underneath your starting number?
the first one is going to be the first 2 numbers of his file number is always the year. So whatever year Victor
Yes.
started, that's going to be the first 2 digits of every.
So we can go
file.
backwards
If
to
you want to,
create
you
new.
could assign a number.
Right,
yes.
and that's why I was suggesting that we choose how many years back we want to go as the first phase, because anything older than that would really be kind of more for posterity. And if there was anybody here that had enough institutional memory, even my own memory fails me at times, if anybody had enough institutional memory to say, there was a case back in 1999, and
So this is a really weird, maybe stupid idea, but I think we, in this process, want to renumber all of the file numbers and append the 20 to the beginning of them, because on the off chance that this database makes sense and they're using it
in the future, right?
95 years from now,
Yeah.
eventually the file numbers do.
Are you worrying about like Y3K problems that we're going to have?
It's not Y3K, it's Y2100.
Right. Yeah.
Y2100.
I don't think that.
It might
I don't
be
think that's
over
well. I
detailed,
I
but-
think. Well, I think the thing is that I think when you hit year 2100, that's when you start adding 21 in front, and then just notate all priors is for the previous
That'll work.
century.
So my only thought on why the orders of determination are an easy sort of point is that we can actually just start changing our format for the orders of determination to include all the fields that we want in it. And that when a case concludes and there's an order of determination, then we enter it into the system at the same time we write the order of determination, we fill out all the tags, and then that goes into the database of concluded cases rather than a database that also includes open cases.
Are you talking about the point of data entry, or are you talking about the point of front end search?
I think it's sort of similar both, because I mean, if we're talking about what the database is, I mean, we framed this as a database of orders of determination for the sake of figuring out what had happened in the past and what decisions we made in the past.
Right.
So we're only going to know what those decisions are we made in the past, and when there's an order of determination, and that order of determination could be a order of determination or there was no order of determination or whatever, but the conclusion of the case. And if it's entered into the database at that point, then that's a good point for tagging it. Because if we order it, if we start entering it in and tagging things before a decision has been made, then maybe we're adding in a bunch of codes that ultimately are not relevant to the discussion.
Okay.
Or we're adding, because what point are we adding in it? Because I think that it comes in and maybe the person maybe alleges one section, but by the time it gets to DCA COLA, he's added like 7 or 8 things. And then by
Right.
the time it gets to the task force, we've narrowed that thing from 8 down to 2 or 1 or
Got
none.
it.
Right, but actually each of those pieces of data does have some merit. Like, I think that there's.
I agree because I think if it was originally, if DCA COLA or whoever legal counsel is found it to be in one section, but then the task force decided that it wasn't, it doesn't mean that it's irrelevant information.
So, but is Victor going to be entering this in at 3 different stages? When we receive it, and then he enters the first batch, and then when DCA COLA presents his thing, and then he's entering the next thing, and then we find the determination.
So here's the thing: if you take the Legistar type of system, that's what they do. You know, legislation gets introduced, it gets entered in, and then its first hearing and everything that happens during that hearing, somebody goes in and updates it. So there's somebody who's actually tracking those files all the way through the end. I think luckily for us, our cases don't run, more than maybe a month or so, or 2 months. And I think he's already doing that work. He's tracking it for whatever system that he's using. He's got a way to track it. So I think if it was all online and he had the ability to do it in the same kind of way, I think the better question here for me is, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter where you start. You should have a choice of where you want to start your online experience in this database. We don't have to build it to do that at the beginning, but I think at some point in time, a person can say, I want to start my search only with the ODs. And other people say, I want to start my search only with the complaints. Some people might say, I want to start my search only with file numbers or year or some sort of
we're talking
kind
about
of top-level taxonomy.
So we're talking about an additional level to this database is actually splitting up the types of documents that are in each folder. So you're only searching city attorney memos to the task force, and we're only searching the complaints, or we're only searching. I mean,
right,
only
but it
the
really
consistent things that we're going to have for each one, because I don't think we can say, like, only search for letters responding from the agency, because sometimes the agency is going to give us 3 letters, and
Right.
sometimes they're going to give us none, and sometimes there's going to be a long threaded email exchange.
It should basically be dialog boxes so that you're identifying which. I want to use the word kingdoms of information, but that's probably not the proper term. But which silo you're pulling from, so that you say, oh, I want orders of determination and supplemental documents. So you mark those boxes, or you just search for the whole thing. Like, I'm looking for any time someone references the word Kevorkian, and like just type that word in and see.
I mean, that's like the easiest thing, I think. I mean, we could just dump everything into.
No, but I'm saying you can choose which of these you're, so that you can.
So we would
choose
need to
what
tag
layer-
the documents, like the actual documents, and not just the case
Right, the
file.
documents need to be categorized, and then the cases need to be broken down into all those pieces.
Okay. I think if we're asking for the moon, we might as well ask for a full-time data entry employee.
Yeah.
Like, I think that we could certainly
It would
find enough
need
work.
quite a bit of thumbing through files and analysis.
Yeah. Like, we could find enough work for a person, like, considering how much backlog there is.
Well, I would say figuring out how much the heavy lift is going to be archived, pulling in archives, because that's not regular real-time work, and that's something that will overwhelm Victor, our current administrator, with just adapting to the new system and making sure everything gets in there, or at least the previous, whatever active cases there are, going back in time. And some, for us, they can go back 6 months. So I agree. I mean, if it could be, 1 year, a staffer for 1 year.
Well, I mean, instead of identifying a full-time data entry person, why don't we make a full-time permanent position that's like the historian of Sunshine data, so they're in charge of both entering it and running analysis, so that they can give us like a weekly report.
There's definitely
Wait a
more
minute, wait a
applications
minute.
for that job than
It's-
data entry.
It's hard enough just to get the legal counsel to show up at committee meetings anymore. It's going to be hard to ask for something on the long term.
No.
But I think for the purposes of getting it up and rolling, I think it'll be reasonable to ask for a year's worth of, and then see how that goes, and if it needs to be, if it's a contract or if it's a part-time position needs to be rehired, then we just ask for it in the next budget cycle. I mean, it's a 2-year budget cycle as it is, so it would be more or less a 2-year position. We could probably get away with that.
Right, I'm just saying that if this were in the nonprofit sector, I don't know how government works, I'd be advocating we hire someone to run reports on the data and make them do data entry as part of that responsibility, than hiring someone whose job it is to input the data, because they're not going to be able to run reports.
But if they worked in a nonprofit, they'd be sweeping the floors and making the coffee and running deliveries and
Being mindful of the time,
and
should we
managing the books. and-
Sure.
should we take public comment and then
Yeah.
finish it up?
Yeah.
So public comment.
I think a lot of this has to do with how the complainant initially writes the complaint in the beginning. If they're going to cite various sections of the codes, and that's going to be entered in, and that's going to be part of the discussion. If they don't know how to write a complaint, and that's a big problem, then it's kind of a mishmash. And if somebody's really knowledgeable and they've been around for a long time, they're going to have a greater success rate in winning sunshine complaints because they know what they're doing, and they're going to be entered in, and they're going to have a lot of personal knowledge, and they're going to be able to put their orders up on the screen and that kind of thing. But for somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing and they're kind of fishing around, it's going to be kind of hard.
So should we move on to the next item?
We'd like to continue this matter to the call of the
Yes.
chair.
Is that the way to go about it?
You can do that, or we
Then-
can schedule a meeting now. It's up to you.
Well, given it's an ad hoc
Right.
group,
This committee runs itself, more or less.
right, but I was just saying that it might make, rather than, it doesn't really matter which way it goes, we should probably schedule a meeting, whether it's scheduling it as the follow-up now or the follow-up meeting. It all works out to be the same thing.
Right. Well, I would suggest that we have another meeting because I think there's.
I think we should have another meeting, but should we discuss that in the next item when we're talking about future
Yes,
meetings?
let's do that.
Okay.
So call.
so-
Would someone
Ellen.
like to make a motion to continue the matter to the call of the chair?
Yes. would
I'll
somebody-
move. I'll move to continue the matter. at the call of the
Second.
chair.
Okay. Help me out here with the next step.
So
On
then-
that
then
motion?
On that.
motion, all those in favor?
All right. So, are you ready, Victor? So, all those in favor? Can we take stuff by acclamation? Is that
Yes.
an option? All right. Then let's do that.
And then ask if there are any objections.
Is there any objections?
Seeing no objections.
Seeing no objections.
Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Now wrap your gavel.
All right.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is item 4, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items and pending calendar.
So I believe we have 3 on here of issues we want to tackle in the future. I think that I don't know how much discussion we need to have over these other than they're on here for us to meet on. Is that right?
Well, I'd like
Or-
to. I'd like to have a little more. Get down into a little more of the weeds as far as schema, and then concepts. I mean, just building our kitchen sink.
Okay.
As to where, from what points does a person start? That kind of thing. I think a little more of the details that we were discussing.
Okay.
I think it's worthwhile because once got to create an RFP for something, we're going to need the information. So I think we can tackle a lot of that in another hour.
Okay.
Another meeting for an hour.
So for the
We
next
have another
meeting,
15 minutes. Oh, sorry. I thought.
No,
My
not this
misunderstanding.
meeting.
no, at a future meeting,
Right, future meeting.
we would like to devote an hour to discussing that
Right.
issue.
Right.
All And then other issues that we need to deal
Well,
with.
should we schedule that?
Sure.
Can we schedule that? I mean, do you already know?
We should, we do have the meeting with the clerk of the board regarding staffing time. However, the next meeting of the Compliance Amendments Committee has been rescheduled to the end of the next month, which would be May 30th. But they're starting at 4 o'clock. We could probably meet after them. The Compliance and Amendments Committee meets on the 23rd at 5:30. We can meet before them.
Wait a second. Which committee was on 5:30?
Complaint Committee.
Oh, complaints,
On the
okay.
23rd.
Oh, complaints on
Complaint
the
committee is
23rd.
on the 23rd.
And we could do the same thing, meet at 4 o'clock and have an hour and a half of discussion time.
On May 23rd? I can do that.
Yeah, it works for me too. How about you, Josh?
It should work.
Okay, so let's.
There's potentially something that'll be on the Board of Soups that week, but we won't know for 6 weeks. So
Right. Okay.
Okay, can we make sure that member Eldon is looped in as well, in case he wants to attend?
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna add that in. And then, as far as that's different on these 3 items on the agenda, that is different than the electronic archives and backups with the Department of Technology. Is that a separate item?
Wait, from what we just were
So
talking
on these,
about?
yeah. So under
Yeah.
item number 4, I just
Oh,
am
yeah.
not sure if this
Hold on.
first bullet point is different than what we just discussed.
Yeah. Let me just get my. Oops.
It seems completely different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is different. Let me just see your agenda so you can see. Okay, so great. Okay, we got that part. So, right. So for future items, so these are some items that I put down.
Yeah.
Electronic archives and backups with departments. So we've had a number of cases where there have been some departments have backups and they can retrieve things from them, and others say we don't have them. And I just because I've sat in so many COIT meetings, Committee on IT meetings, I know that everybody keeps a backup, especially in an enterprise like this. So I think just having a discussion with Department of Technology how that works, because they had been trying to centralize everything using virtual machines, hypervisors, whatever you want to. Everybody's got a different name for them. And so they were trying to centralize all data into one kind of central data center. And I don't know what the status is on that, but I think it's worthwhile to discuss it, because where respondents claim that they don't have responsive information, but then other documents state that it exists somewhere, they could at least it can be requested from Department of Technology to retrieve those documents, so the requester can have the documents.
Okay.
The second one was this was the Smith versus San Jose case, that we should have probably Paul Zarefsky come down from the city attorney's office, because he just sent out a memo on how to deal with this stuff.
Is that different than the one we received at the last task force hearing?
I think that was the same one. Okay. But at least having a discussion, because this is like a whole new area now that will somebody will start asking for that stuff. And then the question is, the ruling basically said that it's kind of on the honor system, that the information should be retrieved by the actual custodian themselves. There was no real level of enforcement or anything built into the ruling. So that most likely will end up being some sort of state law that will get developed over the course of time. But at least if it comes up for us, we should at least have some idea how to deal with it. And we should find out at least how is the city dealing with it.
So where are you drawing the boundaries of this item? So are we just talking about personal devices and personal email accounts? Is that...
Right. That's what the case was all about.
Well, I know, but there's also, like, they could use their personal Facebook account to also make, back when Wiener was a supervisor, his public Facebook account was potentially within this realm. So I'm trying to figure out whether we're exclusively talking about email and phones, or whether the social media realm is part of this, or is
all
a different thing.
All of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's all of it. Yeah, I wouldn't take what's written on this to be the.
That's
literal.
fine. I see how they could be broken off or combined.
If we want to change personal to like non-personal and non-governmental accounts or something like that.
It's fine the way it's written. I just need clarification.
Yeah. And then the automatic response system. We've had some difficulties, around that with various respondents, and how to deal with that when it comes to IDRs. How do we make sure? And so we've made some suggestions, and responses have said that hasn't worked for them. Though for some of us, we feel it's an obvious way it should be done. So I think having some sort of discussion so that we can get some regularity and try to help it out. It helps reduce our docket, so we don't have to retrieve those complaints all the time. So those are the items also that worth discussing, I think, in the next meeting.
I had a few more. I think we're going to probably run out of time with this meeting, but also time for future IT ad hoc committee meetings pretty quickly. So maybe some of these things can actually be discussed by other committees if necessary.
Okay.
I've been speaking with Ted Hahn, who runs Document Cloud for investigative reporters and editors, and he'd be interested in talking to a committee or the full task force at some point about what that tool does as far as being able to use it to look at some of the larger PDF sets that we have to deal with. I use Document Cloud to go over my task force agenda items like to notate and to split up the documents. I have been reluctant to offer that to something for other members to look at, even though I find it useful to be able to make a bookmark for this letter's on page 54, because I'm worried about because I only do that like on the Sunday before a hearing, and I'm worried about sharing that and that causing Brown Act problems or something like that when sharing a document that I've made
Right.
notes on. But perhaps if Ted Hahn was able to talk to us, might give us some feedback on how people can use it individually, and maybe we can come up with some solutions on how that might be a tool that we can share without running into sunshine problems.
Well, the way we run into sunshine problems was my suggestion that we should all have, city email accounts. Okay, so it may be something that may exist in the city's enterprise already,
Yeah.
or something like where we can get it adopted, and then we don't have a run into that kind of problem.
Okay.
Well, I think the problem is that people are making notes on a live agenda before it happens that are members of the meeting, so it becomes a serial meeting. Is what Dave was.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, so I'm not so
There's
concerned
that.
about that because you can, on Document Cloud, you can set private notes for yourselves that no one else can see. The question is if I go through and I split up a 200-page document to say, this is where the city attorney memo is, this is where the response from the complainant is, this is where the responsive
So-
records start, if that's enough to be a sharing notes with somebody else, if I'm just tabbing something.
I think better, this is something I've requested of Victor to try and see if we can create some sort of bookmarking system within even just Adobe Acrobat, which I think it does have, just because it's really hard electronically to separate things out. I mean, if it was paper, I mean, I used to receive every month like 400 pages, double-sided from the task force before they kind of put everything up online. So I had to sit there with Post-it notes, and put everything. Then the other bigger problem is you got streams of emails. You don't know where one begins and one ends because everybody's responding in the same thread. So it can get. I understand it gets a little squirrely. I think it's a good idea. We could do
just
it.
put it out.
We could do it at any meeting you suggest.
Okay.
Absolutely. What else?
So I think there are some things on our website that probably need to be updated. I think that there's a page that shows the meetings historically on the wrong dates that they are. That's not I think there's just one page that
You're
shows
talking
that.
about just cleaning up certain
Yeah,
things
just
on
cleaning
the
up certain
website?
pages on our website. We should talk about that in the future. I think we'll probably run into some SB 272 accountability issues. I don't think that's a huge priority until we start getting complaints on it.
Remind me what that is.
That's the CPRA provision requiring the government to keep an inventory of enterprise systems.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we had a hearing in the Compliance and Amendment Committee that also raised some questions. Eventually, people are going to complain about it, and then we'll have to figure out how to deal with complaints on that.
Okay.
And then the final thing is there have been some issues with how the police department is doing its online system and automatically enrolling people into their online database and requiring people to set up an account in order to access stuff. I'm not sure if that's right for this committee. It is an IT issue, but I also feel like it's a very serious issue that maybe requires maybe a little more scrutiny.
Yeah.
But just raising that here and now.
I think it goes back to the auto response,
Yeah.
the kind of thing, because if you submit something through a portal and then it gets lost in the sauce somewhere, you end up with the same.
It definitely goes beyond the auto response because being told that you have to use their system
Right.
and the system doesn't let you not give your name
Right.
is
No
Or
anonymous.
it does say anonymous, but if you lose your number, you have to file it. It actually explicitly says you have to file it all
again.
over again. So there's certainly some straight up compliance issues that are just sitting there.
Okay, well, it's worthwhile discussion. We'll post it for the,
But just want to be mindful because if we don't wrap up now,
Yeah.
you are in the next committee.
I am.
So you'll probably need a little break.
Yeah.
Public comment on that? Seeing no public comment, are we ready to adjourn then?
move to adjourn.
second.
I guess we'll take. Are there any objections? We can take that up by acclamation. All right then.
We're adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.